Hi guys, my name's Ashley, and I am doing my Illustrator presentation on Maurice Sendak. Maurice Sendak was a children's book writer and illustrator, as well as a um, opera and theater set and costume designer. Um, Starting out, Maurice said he had been doing illustrations since he was a small child. When he was a teenager, he started sending his illustrations out to publishing companies, but he said nobody liked his work and he needed to get a job. So when he was 20, he went and got a job at FAO Schwartz creating window displays. And he said he just filled the windows with all of his pictures, and through doing that, had an editor come in and asked the manager who did their window displays, and that is how he got his first job as an illustrator for children's books. Some of the children's books that he's written and illustrated are Kenny's Window, um, which is about a boy who dreams of a magical garden and sets out to find it, and it explores the themes of loneliness and love and growing up in childhood. Another book he wrote was Very Far Away, and this is about a boy who gets frustrated with his mom because he doesn't feel like she's giving him enough attention. So he sets off on a journey with a horse, a cat, and a bird. Many of Sendak's books, maybe all of Sendak's books, are centered around mundane aspects of childhood that border on the fantastical. Um, Other children's books he wrote, The Nutshell Library, was this set of books that were very small, could fit in a children's hand. And in the set were Alligators All Around, which was an alphabet book, Chicken Soup with Rice, which was a months of the year book. One was Johnny, which was a counting book, and Pierre, which was a cautionary tale. Um, the book he wrote and illustrated that he's most famous for is Where the Wild Things Are, and this is the book that, or this book is the reason I chose to do Sendak for my Illustrator presentation. It is one of my daughter's favorite books, and it's one of my favorite books because of the illustrations. I just think they're beautiful. Um, this book was very controversial with adults when it came out. They all, so many people said that they thought these monsters were much too scary for children and that it was a bad book. But um, it was sensational, had lots of sales, children loved it. Um, and one funny thing that heard through interviews with Sendak is that he based these monster characters off of his relatives, his memory of his relatives as a child, because he said when he was a child, his aunts and uncles would come over and on the weekends and take up their space and pinch his cheeks and scratch him and eat his food, and he felt like they were wild things, and so that's who these characters are based off of, is his actual aunts and uncles that would come over to his house when he was a child. Another book he wrote was In the Night Kitchen, and this was also a controversial book because one of the pictures, which I couldn't find online, shows a little boy's penis. And in the interviews, he's talked to about the controversy of a lot of his books. And he talks about how he doesn't think that as adults we're honest enough with children, and that children know a lot more than we think they do, and we need to give them the decency of being more honest with them and answering the hard questions instead of sweeping them under the rug. Um, so that was another one. And the last one I put in here that he wrote and illustrated was Outside Over There. I put this one in here because in his interviews he talks about this being his favorite book that he wrote, even though it didn't do very well as far as sales go. He said that the theme was too ambiguous, and there wasn't really a great ending, but that he thought this was his best book. And the illustrations in this book are based off of German Romanticism. He said right before he wrote this book, he had been on a trip in Germany and became obsessed with early German Romantic paintings. And so that's what the style of the illustrations in this book are based off of. I think they're very beautiful. He, in addition to writing and illustrating his own books, he also illustrated over 100 books for other authors. And some of the classics that he illustrated for were Brothers Grimm. It was The Juniper Tree and Other Tales from Grimm. So that's the two black and white illustrations closest to the title of this slide. Then the top center illustration was the cover for Tail Feathers from Mother Goose. So another classic that he illustrated. He did all the illustrations for, but was just the cover was the one I could find. And then the other two images are images that are illustrations that he did for Nicolena's childhood, and that's by Leo Tolstoy. He did many, many more, but these were just a couple that I was able to include here. While he's best known for his children's book illustrations, he also made a second career out of costume and stage design for opera and theater. And in his interviews, he talks about if he could have done anything, it wouldn't have been illustrating. That he has a very, very big love for music, and he wished he could have been in the music industry, but that he couldn't carry a tune, and so the closest he could get to music was the opera. So he did stage and costume design for both opera and theater. The images you see here, the top closest to the title is one of his drawings for a set design for Magic Flute. Top closest to the edge is a illustration that he did for the Nutcracker curtain design, because he worked on Tchaikovsky's The Nutcracker. Magic Flute was Mozart. And then down here at the bottom is storyboards that he did for costume and set design for Prokofiev's The Love of Three Oranges. So those were a few of the things he did. In addition to this, he also started a children's theater that was nonprofit called The Night Kitchen. So that's kind of where he was in theater and opera. And then lastly, while I was kind of doing research on him, I found out that Stephen King is coming out with his own rendition of Hansel and Gretel, and he is going to be using the illustrations that Sendak originally created for the Humperdinck opera of Hansel and Gretel in 1997. So this will be coming out in September of 2025, and these are just a couple of the illustrations that will be included in this book. And that's it. Thank you, guys.